Night Watch Archives, Case File 001, The Lizard Man, the night that started the legend. There are places in America where history leaves behind more questions than answers, places where the official record ends. But the stories continue. Scape Ore Swamp is one of those places. Today, its name is known far beyond the borders of South Carolina. Visitors travel to Lee County hoping to stand where one of America's most enduring cryptid legends first entered the historical record. Some come looking for evidence, others come hoping for an experience. Many arrive with a single question: could the stories possibly be true? But long before the newspaper headlines, long before television crews parked their vans along rural roads, long before the name Lizard Man became known across the country, Scape Ore Swamp was simply home. Lee County sits in the PD region of central South Carolina. Even today, it remains a place where agriculture shapes both the landscape and the rhythm of daily life. Small farms stretch across the countryside. Pine forests cover thousands of acres. Creeks wind quietly through low-lying wetlands before disappearing beneath heavy tree cover. The county seat is Bishopville, a town where familiar faces outnumber strangers, where generations of the same families have lived, worked, and built their lives. Outside the town limits, the landscape changes almost immediately. Street lights become scarce. Businesses disappear. The roads narrow. Fields slowly give way to dense woodland. Woodland gives way to wetlands, and eventually to Scape Ore Swamp. To someone visiting for the first time, the swamp can feel isolated, ancient, almost untouched. To the people who lived there in 1988, it was simply another part of the county. Hunters entered its woods every season. Fishermen worked its waterways. Timber crews knew the surrounding forests. Local residents drove the nearby roads every day on their way to work, school, or home. The swamp demanded respect, not because people believed something unknown lived there, but because nature always deserves respect. Flooded ground, dense vegetation, limited visibility, like any wilderness. It could be unforgiving. Every rural community also develops its own folklore. Lee County was no exception. People occasionally spoke about strange lights seen through the trees, unusual sounds heard after dark, moments that couldn't easily be explained. Most of those stories remained exactly where folklore usually remains, within the community, passed from neighbor to neighbor, shared between generations, not as proof, not as evidence, but as stories. And stories have always been part of American history. Night Watch Archives preserves folklore because folklore tells us something important. It tells us how communities remember unusual events. It reveals what people talked about, what they feared, what they wondered about, long before anyone thought to create an official report. Folklore and documented history are not the same thing. One reflects memory, the other reflects investigation. Both deserve preservation, both deserve context, and both become part of the historical record when properly identified. By the summer of 1988, nothing suggested Lee County was about to become part of one of America's best-known cryptid cases. There had been no national headlines, no documentaries, no organized investigations, no roadside attractions. Most people outside South Carolina had never heard of Bishopville. And they certainly had never heard of Scape Ore Swamp. Life moved at its usual pace. Farmers worked their fields, families gathered for dinner. Teenagers spent evenings with friends before making the familiar drive home along quiet county roads. One of those roads was Browntown Road. To local residents, it was simply another route through the countryside. A road bordered by woods, crossing terrain that changed very little from one year to the next. No road signs warned travelers. No local legends marked the location. Nothing about Browntown Road suggested it was about to become one of the most recognizable locations in modern American cryptid history. But history has a habit of beginning quietly, not with crowds, not with cameras, not with certainty. Sometimes, history begins with a single witness, a single report, and one ordinary drive home. That becomes anything but ordinary. June 29th, 1988. History rarely announces itself, most of the time. It begins like any other day. June 29th, 1988. Was one of those days. The summer heat lingered well after sunset. Humidity settled across the fields and woodlands of Lee County. Even after midnight, the air remained warm and still. The roads were nearly empty. Most families had already gone to bed. Porch lights flickered in the distance. The only sounds came from insects hidden in the trees and the occasional passing car. Nothing suggested the Lee County Sheriff's Department would soon receive one of the most unusual reports in its history. 19-year-old Christopher Davis had spent the evening visiting friends. There was nothing remarkable about that. Young people had been doing the same thing in Lee County for generations. Eventually, the evening came to an end. Davis climbed into his car, started the engine, and began the familiar drive home. It wasn't a trip that required much thought. He knew the roads. He knew every curve. He knew where the pavement narrowed and where the trees seemed to close in around the highway. Browntown Road wasn't a road people feared. It was simply part of everyday life, during daylight hours. It looked much like countless other rural roads throughout South Carolina. Wooded on both sides, quiet, ordinary. After dark, the experience changed. Streetlights disappeared. Headlights became the only source of illumination, beyond their reach. Everything vanished into darkness. The trees stood only a few feet from the edge of the pavement. Their branches reached overhead, creating long tunnels of shadow. For local residents, none of that was unusual. It was simply what country roads looked like after midnight. Christopher Davis wasn't looking for anything strange. He wasn't searching for evidence of an unknown creature. He wasn't investigating local folklore. His thoughts were focused on getting home. The drive had become almost automatic. The road stretched ahead. The engine hummed steadily. Everything appeared normal. Then, something caught his attention. Near the edge of the roadway, a figure emerged from the darkness. According to Davis, it was standing upright. For a brief moment, his headlights illuminated it. He would later describe the figure as being larger than any animal he had ever encountered. Its shape didn't immediately resemble anything familiar. The moment passed almost as quickly as it began. Davis reacted instinctively. He pressed the accelerator. His goal wasn't to identify what he had seen. His goal was to leave, instead of remaining at the roadside. The figure moved. according to Davis. It ran toward the vehicle with surprising speed. The distance between them disappeared almost instantly. Then, it jumped. A tremendous impact echoed across the roof of the car. Something scraped violently down the driver's side. The mirror shattered. Metal groaned beneath the force. For several terrifying seconds, Davis later said he believed something was on the vehicle itself. He never stopped. He kept driving, his attention fixed on the road ahead. His only thought, putting as much distance as possible between himself and whatever had just happened. Eventually, he reached a place where he felt safe enough to pull over. The road behind him was empty. The night had become quiet once again. Whatever had struck the vehicle was gone. Davis stepped from the car. Under the available light, he began examining the damage. Long scratches cut across the exterior. The driver's side mirror hung broken. Marks were visible on the roof. This was no longer simply a frightening memory. There was physical evidence. Something had happened. What that something was, he couldn't explain. Hours later, he made a decision that transformed one man's story into an official investigation. He reported the encounter to the Lee County Sheriff's Department. The first official report. By sunrise, Christopher Davis had a choice to make. He could explain away the damage, tell friends he had struck a tree branch, hit a deer, run over debris in the road, or he could tell investigators exactly what he believed had happened. He chose the second option. Later that morning, Davis contacted the Lee County Sheriff's Department and reported the encounter. The report marked the beginning of what would become one of South Carolina's most unusual modern investigations. Deputies listened carefully, not because they immediately believed an unknown creature had attacked a vehicle, but because someone had reported an incident involving unexplained damage. That alone warranted documentation. As with any report, investigators began with what they could verify. Not speculation, not rumors, facts. Christopher Davis described the events of the previous night. He identified the location. He explained the sequence of events as he remembered them. He described seeing an upright figure near Browntown Road. He described accelerating away. He described something striking the vehicle. And he described stopping only after he believed he had reached safety. Once the statement had been taken, investigators turned their attention to the vehicle itself. Unlike memory, a damaged automobile could be examined, photographed, measured, preserved. Deputies observed long scratches across the exterior. The driver's side mirror had been damaged. Marks were visible on the roof. Those observations became part of the official record. The damage existed. That much was certain. The question was, what caused it? Investigators searched for evidence that might answer that question. They looked for biological material, hair, blood, tissue, anything that might identify what had come into contact with the vehicle. Nothing conclusive was recovered. Attention then shifted to the location itself. Browntown Road bordered the wooded terrain surrounding Scape Ore Swamp. Deputies were familiar with the area. Wildlife encounters were not uncommon. Deer crossed those roads regularly. Dogs occasionally wandered from nearby properties. Other animals moved through the surrounding woods after dark. Investigators considered those possibilities. They had to. An investigation begins by eliminating ordinary explanations before considering extraordinary ones. Yet none of the immediately available explanations accounted for everything that had been reported. The physical damage remained. Christopher Davis remained consistent in his account. The investigation reached an uncomfortable place. There was enough evidence to document the incident, not enough evidence to explain it. That distinction remains one of the defining characteristics of this case. Within Night Watch archives, eyewitness testimony and physical evidence serve different purposes. A witness tells investigators what they experienced. Physical evidence documents what investigators can independently observe. Neither automatically proves the other. Neither automatically dismisses the other. Together, they form the historical record. And in this investigation, the historical record remained incomplete. By the end of that first day, the Lee County Sheriff's Department had a witness, a damaged vehicle, an official report, and far more questions than answers. Under ordinary circumstances, that might have marked the end of the investigation. Instead, it became the beginning, because the report filed by Christopher Davis would soon become known throughout Lee County. And once it did, other people would begin looking at the woods surrounding Scape Ore Swamp a little differently. Soon, the Sheriff's Department would receive another report, then another, and another. The investigation was no longer confined to one stretch of road or one damaged vehicle. It was beginning to spread, and with it, so did the mystery. The investigation expands. By the end of June, the Browntown Road encounter was no longer known only to Christopher Davis or the deputies who had taken his report. Word had begun to spread. At first, it spread the way news usually does in a small southern community. Quietly, a conversation at work, a discussion over breakfast at a local diner, neighbors talking across a fence. Someone had heard about the damaged car. Someone else knew Christopher Davis personally. Another claimed to have spoken with a deputy involved in the investigation. Each retelling remained close to the original report. A young man driving home late at night, an unidentified figure near the roadway, a damaged vehicle. An official report filed with the Sheriff's Department. Then, the newspapers became involved. Local reporters contacted investigators. They interviewed Christopher Davis. They examined photographs of the damaged vehicle. Unlike later national coverage, those early articles remained measured. They reported what investigators could confirm. A report had been filed. A vehicle had sustained unusual damage. The cause remained undetermined. Beyond those facts, the articles avoided reaching conclusions. That distinction mattered. The public was not told what to believe. They were told what had happened. As those articles circulated, something changed. The Sheriff's Department began receiving additional calls. Some came from residents who believed they had seen something unusual near Scape Ore Swamp. Others reported encounters that had occurred days earlier but had never been reported because they seemed too unusual to mention. Several callers described seeing a large figure near isolated roadways after dark. Others reported hearing strange sounds coming from wooded areas bordering the swamp. Not every report described the same thing. Some accounts were brief. Others contained significant detail. Some included estimated locations and times. Others consisted of little more than a frightened description before the witness ended the conversation. For investigators, every report created another decision. Which reports deserved immediate follow-up? Which could be independently verified? Which were simply repeating details already circulating through the community? These questions were not unique to the Lizard Man investigation. They are common in any investigation that begins receiving increased public attention. Once an event becomes widely known, people naturally begin paying closer attention to things they might previously have ignored. Investigators understood that. At the same time, they also understood another reality. Sometimes genuine witnesses remain silent until they discover someone else has reported a similar experience. The challenge was determining where independent observation ended and where influence from publicity began. Deputies responded the only way they could. Each report was considered individually. Witnesses were interviewed. Locations were compared. Timelines were reviewed. Patterns were sought. Some reports appeared unrelated. Others shared similarities that investigators could not immediately dismiss. Roads surrounding Scape Ore Swamp appeared repeatedly. Late evening and early morning hours appeared repeatedly. Brief encounters, sudden movement, darkness, limited observation time. These recurring elements did not prove the reports were connected. Neither did they allow investigators to ignore them. The file was growing. What had begun with a single witness was becoming a collection of statements, a collection of locations, a collection of unanswered questions. The investigation itself had begun to evolve. No longer centered entirely on Christopher Davis, it now included multiple reports spread across the same general area. Whether those reports described one phenomenon, several unrelated incidents, or nothing more than coincidence, could not yet be determined. But one thing had become clear. The Browntown Road encounter was no longer an isolated event within the sheriff's files. It had become the starting point of a much larger investigation, one that was about to attract attention far beyond the borders of Lee County. The record remains open. Every investigation has a beginning, some have an ending, others remain open. The events of June 29, 1988, gave investigators something they could document. A witness came forward. A statement was taken. A damaged vehicle was examined. An official report was filed. Those facts have never been in dispute. What has remained in dispute is everything that followed. What did Christopher Davis actually encounter on Browntown Road? What left the scratches on his vehicle? Why did the reported movement of the figure differ from the behavior normally associated with wildlife? Could every detail be explained by ordinary circumstances? Or did investigators document the opening moments of something they simply could not identify? The historical record has never provided a definitive answer, and that is precisely why this case continues to be discussed today. Cases are rarely remembered because they are solved. They are remembered because they resist explanation. The Browntown Road encounter became significant not because it proved the existence of an unknown creature, but because it survived investigation without a definitive conclusion. Law enforcement documented what could be documented. Witnesses described what they believed they had experienced. Newspapers reported the known facts. Researchers continued asking questions. Each contributed another page to the record. None produced a final answer. That uncertainty has allowed the story to endure. Over the years, the Lizard Man has become many things. A regional legend, a tourist attraction, a subject of books, documentaries, television programs, and countless internet discussions. With every retelling, the story changed a little. Descriptions became more dramatic, details were added, others were forgotten, illustrations replaced eyewitness descriptions. Entertainment gradually blended with history. That is one of the reasons the archive exists, not to repeat the legend, but to preserve the record beneath it, to separate documented evidence from later embellishment, to distinguish official investigation from public imagination, to preserve folklore without confusing it for evidence, and to preserve evidence without forcing it to become folklore. This case file has focused on one question: what happened on the night the lizard man entered the historical record? The answer is remarkably straightforward. A young man reported an encounter. Investigators documented damage to his vehicle. An official report entered the records of the Lee County Sheriff's Department. That is where this investigation begins. It is also where this case file ends. But the investigation itself did not end there. Within days, additional witnesses began contacting authorities. More reports arrived. Investigators expanded their attention beyond a single roadway. Local newspapers carried the story. Public interest grew. Questions multiplied. The file became thicker. The investigation became larger. Those records deserve the same careful examination as the first report. They deserve their own investigation, their own evidence, their own conclusions, because every drawer inside the Night Watch archives contains only one file, and every file answers only one question. The remaining records are still waiting. Until they are opened, they remain exactly where they have been since the summer of 1988. Preserved, catalogued, waiting for examination. Case file 001 is now closed. The truth waits in the dark.